All right, let's dive right into this explainer and completely reframe the mainstream narrative we keep hearing about our aging power grid and the booming electric vehicle market. If you watch the news, you've definitely heard the panic, right? The whole idea that millions of EVs plugging in at once are just going to completely overwhelm the system. But today, we're looking at some pretty incredible data that shows why this massive shift might actually be the exact brilliant solution we've been waiting for. To really grasp the scale of what we're dealing with, just think about this for a second. In 2023 alone, Americans purchased over 1.4 million new EVs. That is a massive, lightning-fast transition, and it's literally happening right in our own driveways. And the acceleration is just staggering. With over 5.8 million EVs already cruising around out there, the demand for electricity is growing exceptionally fast. In fact, projections from the Department of Energy suggest that by 2050, the electricity needed just to charge EVs could reach up to 50% of today's entire grid demand. So this impending surge naturally brings us to the elephant in the room. Is this a total crisis waiting to happen for our infrastructure? It's a completely fair question. If everyone comes home at 6 p.m., cranks up their AC, and plugs in their car, can our aging grid actually handle that kind of surge? Let's move into Section 1. Meet the grid's new asset, from a passive load to a dynamic solution. Here is the absolute plot twist of this century. EVs aren't actually just a burden to the grid. They are essentially millions of batteries on wheels. And that changes the whole game. This brings us to a concept called VGI, or Vehicle Grid Integration. Simply put, VGI strategically connects EVs with the electric grid to meet those growing charging needs, while actually allowing the cars themselves to become a dynamic asset to the grid. It's the intersection of transportation and electricity working together symbiotically instead of fighting against each other. VGI basically takes the entire grid ecosystem and perfectly aligns it with how customers actually charge their cars. It takes that super simple act of plugging in and turns it into a highly responsive, flexible system. We're talking everything from the physical hardware and software all the way up to market regulations, all coordinating perfectly to capture real, tangible savings. There's such a clear contrast here when you compare the two. The old way of thinking is what we'd call dumb, one-way charging right during peak hours, which obviously puts immense stress on the system. But the VGI way, that is smart, two-way managed charging. It effortlessly shifts the load to off-peak times, it can actually earn you money, and it actively supports the reliability of the entire grid. Which brings us to Section 2, lowering bills for everyone and how non-EV drivers win big. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what's in it for me if I don't even drive an EV? Well, prepare to have your mind blown by this statistic from a real-world Synapse Energy study. It found that EV drivers contributed roughly $2.44 billion in revenue for utilities, and that's net of program costs over an 11-year period. By strategically spreading utility costs across a much larger number of electricity sales, EVs have actually created downward pressure on electricity rates for absolutely everyone. You don't even need an electric car in your garage to benefit from those lower bills. And the savings scale up dramatically when we really lean into managed charging. By simply shifting when cars pull power to off-peak times, managed charging gives us astonishingly cost-effective solutions that help us dodge the need for massive, expensive grid upgrades. For example, Pacific Gas and Electric estimated yearly savings of around $300 per EV. But wait, it gets better. We're also looking at roughly $4,000 in avoided lifetime infrastructure costs per vehicle. Multiply that by millions of cars, and honestly, the math is just undeniable. And it's not just the big macro grid. This works right down at the micro level, inside your own house. If you live in an older home, you probably dread the idea of spending thousands of dollars on an electrical panel upgrade just to install a charger. But smart load-sharing devices can talk to your home system, coordinate with its limits, and completely avoid those costly upgrades by optimizing the electricity demand to work safely within the capacity you already have. All of this amazing stuff triggers what the Department of Energy calls the virtuous cycle of VGI. It creates this incredible positive feedback loop that speeds up integration while keeping everything super affordable. Think about it. Affordable electricity leads to more affordable charging. That naturally allows for the timely energization of demand, which gives utilities the confidence they need to actually invest in infrastructure. That, in turn, leads to way better utilization of our grid assets, which ultimately puts downward pressure on electricity rates for everyone. It is a fantastic, self-sustaining loop. Moving into Section 3, the three-part strategy, which is the Department of Energy's blueprint. So, to make this incredible vision a reality on a national scale, the DOE has outlined a highly actionable three-part strategy. Because, let's face it, seamlessly integrating millions of cars into the grid isn't just a fun technology puzzle, it is a massive, complex coordination challenge. This blueprint is basically designed to build a solid bridge from small local pilot programs all the way up to a massive national scale, broken down into three logical steps. Step 1 is all about validation. The focus here is making absolutely sure that these solutions work reliably in the messy real world, so that whatever we learn can easily be extended across different regions. For example, if a flexible charge management program works flawlessly out in California, the DOE wants to validate those learnings so they can be smoothly and safely adopted by a utility in Ohio or Texas. Step 2 is support, because, redefining utility business models that have been around for over a century requires an immense amount of cooperation. It's really about getting automakers, government regulators, and everyday customers to finally play by the exact same set of new rules. The DOE's goal is to provide the resources and the accessible data required to essentially rewrite the rules of the grid and share them with everyone. And finally, step 3 is to spur innovation. We definitely can't afford to remain stagnant. The DOE is pushing hard for continuous improvement in technology, adapting existing processes, and this is a big one: developing the actual human workforce we're going to need to install and maintain all this brand new infrastructure. When you bring the whole shebang together, integrating your driveway with your rooftop solar and the local grid, you start to realize something pretty profound. VGI is quite literally the ultimate Swiss Army knife for energy management. It seamlessly connects your car, your home, and your broader community into one single, highly responsive ecosystem. Which brings us to our final takeaway. And I want to leave you with this thought. Will your next car be the key to powering a cheaper, more resilient grid for everyone? It's pretty wild to consider how your everyday commute might quietly end up saving your entire neighborhood money. Now that is an electrifying plot twist. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep asking the big questions.